So good afternoon, everyone. I am Deepak. I'm an optometrist, and my special interest is providing care, low vision care, in optometry practice. And at LV Prasad Institute, I have been working since 2007. And whatever little low vision I practice and I have learned is while my fellowship at LV Prasad Institute and through examining patients with low vision. So I thank Kapil, Rohit, who have organized such event that I can share the learning that I have. And today's learning objectives would be that next 45 minutes or so we would be focusing on to understand what is functional low vision, what causes low vision, how many people have got this condition, and what is low vision rehabilitation all about, how do we manage, what are the strategies that are used. And today we will not deal much in detail with so what we will not work on is the electronic and the high end assistive devices and tertiary level low vision rehabilitation. We would not cover the rehabilitation of multiple disability. We would be focusing on single disability people having mild to moderate visual impairment, and then how we can manage so that every optometrist has something to do with them. And so that is the purpose. Let's begin with some definitions. So as you may have learned, many definitions, many definitions are existing for visual impairment, blindness, low vision, and people are often confused at where do we use it. So it's important that we understand what is the purpose of that definition. So the definition which you are seeing here of vision impairment and blindness, it says presenting visual acuity. So when it talks about presenting visual acuity, so this definition is primarily used for epidemiological purposes. So when you are doing survey to know that, okay, what is the demand for refractive error, for cataract, and other things. Yes, you want to know, you want to use this definition to know that, okay, what is the market for or the burden of disease, especially uncorrected refractive error cataract. But if you are considering low vision practice, this definition will not give you the correct picture. For that, you have to look for the definition of functional low vision. Considering this definition, when you look at the magnitude, so when you look at different studies, you would find that, okay, people have mentioned about that, okay, this is the prevalence of visual impairment. There are 1.3 billion people in total. If you look at here, 1.3 billion people having visual impairment, and majority of it is because of the near visual acuity is affected, and near vision is in the presenting visual acuity is less than N6, which means these are mostly presbyopes that have been included in this population. Similarly, if you look at these categories of visual impairment, mild, moderate, severe, these are again defined and classified based on the presenting visual acuity. So which means a major component here would be uncorrected refractive error and cataract, and that can be taken care by any optometrist or ophthalmologist in their general practice. So this does not fall into the low vision. For your low vision practice, for your low vision practice, what is important for you to know is the definition of functional low vision. So here in the functional low vision was defined by WHO as a person who has impairment of visual functioning even after treatment and or standard refractive correction in the better eye. So you have to be mindful about each word here. In the better eye, we are looking at even after treatment or standard refractive corrections, which means you have explored if person can improve with the cataract surgery, person can improve with the refractive correction, contact lenses, and has visual acuity of less than 6/18 to light perception. So which means even people having hand movement, counting finger close to the face are all included in the low vision. Or, so here again an important term is or, it's not and. So there may be people who have visual acuity of 20/20 or 6/6, but have a visual field less than 10 degree from the point of fixation, but who uses or is potentially able to use vision for planning and or execution of a task is considered a person with low vision. So that means there will be cases wherein people may have just field loss and the residual vision they are able to use for planning or execution of a task, so they are considered as having functional low vision. Now look at this, some of the different definitions are listed here, nicely depicted that, okay, that is the range where people may have ranging from 6/6 to NPL. So NPL only is considered no perception of light, bilateral is only considered as blind. The other group is all considered in low vision. So when you talk about low vision practice, this complete gamut of thing, the complete range of visual impairment you would include for your practice. But yes, you have to keep in mind that yes, anything which is treatable, correctable, that has to be taken care of first, and then only your service provision starts. I was looking at that, what is the status of prevalence of visual impairment in Nepal. And if you look at these population-based studies which are there for different age group, here in the comparison becomes a bit difficult because people may have used different definitions. Some people may have used best corrected visual acuity. Some people may have used presenting visual acuity. People may have used different methodology for screening, for assessment. Some people may have used RAB method. Some people may have used key informant method. So comparison may be difficult. And if you compare that, okay, the population of adult here, and this is the adult population 60 plus or 40 plus age group, if you look at the prevalence of visual impairment is significantly higher than what you see for children. In children, the prevalence per 1,000, it's only 1. But that is the group of 0 to 10, 0 to 15 if you look at, yes. And that is the mild to moderate impairment that you are looking at here. Severe visual impairment is further lower in number. So severe visual impairment is lower than moderate visual impairment. So majority what you see is here, and again if you compare, less than 3/60 visual acuity is considered as severe visual impairment, and 6/18 to 3/60 you consider as moderate visual impairment. So moderate visual impairment is much significant in number as compared to the severe visual impairment. So usually if you will look at the blind, when people talk about blindness in children or adult, you would find that the number of blindness is much lower than the low vision. So low vision is a greater population. The second which is important here to look at is just don't go by the prevalence which is shown here. Even if the numbers are lower, think about the life expectancy. Think about the number of life years that person has to live with that visual impairment. A person who is say around 70 and because of macular degeneration is having visual impairment, how many more years he has to live with that vision loss versus somebody who's born with the visual impairment because of retinopathy or prematurity or optic atrophy or any other condition. So for that person, for living rest of his life. So that is why when people look at the number of blind years, then they have found that the burden of disease because of the pediatric low vision or pediatric visual impairment is second to the adult visual impairment, which is caused by the cataract. So it has a significant economic burden, and we should not ignore the pediatric low vision. Here, and if you look at an elderly, the majority, as I said, that yes, is treatable, correctable. So that is what has been the focus of Vision 2020 and all the programs. Mostly the
just a minute, sir. I'll be mute to all and everyone once. Okay, sir, can you please unmute yourself? Deepak, sir, can you please unmute yourself? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, am I audible now? Yeah, so the preventable, the correctable things, if you look at, you would find that yes, it is 2/3 or 3/4 in some countries, in some studies. So it may show that okay, about 70%, 75% can be corrected, can be treated, but 25% only is the conditions which cannot be treated, which cannot be corrected, and may need low vision rehabilitation. But there is very few national programs which are there for control of blindness and for focusing on low vision rehabilitation interventions and training of human resources in all those areas. If you compare it with the pediatric group, somehow the slide is stuck. Yeah. So herein, again, it's based on the population-based study, and in Nepal, if you look at here, the preventable causes, treatable causes, and total. So this is total avoidable and then unavoidable causes. Herein, even if these treatable conditions which are listed here, if you see majority is amblyopia due to refractive error, and in this study, majority of the kids were around 9 years or so So if the kids are already 9 years and have not been corrected for the refractive error, whatever you do, you may not achieve 20/20 in both the eyes. And similarly, there may be cases wherein after the lens-related treatable condition, which are seeing the congenital cataract or developmental cataract, even after surgery, patients may not improve to the normal level of functioning. Similarly, in glaucoma, scar, so things which are listed in the treatable conditions, when people say treatable, that yes, 75%, 80%, yes, primary goal is to first take care of the treatment. But even after treatment, you may not have 100% improving to the normal level, and those people would be potentially needing. So okay. So herein, if you look at about 25 to 30% of the population of the visual impairment would require your services, and this is the distribution of different conditions, um, especially the pediatric low vision population that was reported from Sagar Mehta Chaudhary Eye Hospital, Lahan. So they had published this to showcase that okay, across different age group, what are the different conditions leading to low vision, and these cases were seen in their low vision clinic. So in 1 to 5 years, if you look at, these are the causes here. Nystagmus majority, second is coloboma, microphthalmos, and very small proportion of retinopathy of prematurity and CVI. And 6 to 10 years, if you look at, and 11 to 16 years, again the major causes, the top is refractive error and amblyopia, and next comes is your retinal causes, which is retinitis pigmentosa, macular dystrophy in both the conditions. Let's look at some of the examples to understand. In the clinic, if I see a patient, can I identify that this patient will need low vision services or no, based on whatever we have learned so far, based on the definitions which we know. So do you think this gentleman, 19-year-old, would require low vision services? Anyone from the audience? If you can unmute and answer. Does this person has low vision or no?
Sorry, is there any visual field status we can know? I guess we will have
No
the
visual field damage, no
okay.
functional
Yes.
difficulty. So this person was actually
Uh,
referred for the right eye. You have to look for the better eye. So if the better eye visual acuity is nearly normal, no functional limitation, there will not be any intervention from our end. So we didn't intervene. This person does not require low vision services. Look at the second case. So as you thought about, yes, in this case, even if the acuity is normal, we should think about the visual field. And this is what was the report in the visual field, and this person has significant difficulty in mobility, so would require services. Look at this third case. Anybody? Quickly.
Depends on his need. If he's having problem, then it will be. Otherwise, near vision is correct.
N63. Near vision is N63, distance vision is 20 by
No,
600, and
no. There is low vision, I think.
it's not N6. So this person, if you look at, um, but you have to keep in mind that this is the presenting visual acuity, and you're looking at the clinical picture also. So whatever you do, the best correction. So here and after correction also, this person ended up having low vision. So yes, before correction, thing acuity was 20 by 600, but once we corrected it, it improved to 20 by 160. So from blindness category, it improved to low vision category, but it still require further intervention, may require your referral to low vision clinic. So this is a pathological myopia. Best corrected acuity in the right eye is 20 by 100, which is 6 by 30, and left eye is 20 by 320. So better eye is 20 by 100, and near vision is N6 at 25 centimeter. So you have to see This is the presenting visual acuity, not the best corrected visual acuity. So this is with glasses, presenting visual acuity. If we refract again, if it improves and no specific vision related activity limitation with the glasses, you don't need to refer. Just refract, correct, because pathological myopia, there may be change in the prescription. So what this person was using was about -18, and this change in the prescription was bringing an improvement in the acuity, so it didn't require low vision intervention, but however it was referred. So we see about 20% of the patients that are referred just need prescription of glasses, just reassurance that yes, so all patients may not require, and any optometrist can take care of them in whichever subspecialty, whichever places you are working. This is a 4-year-old girl, and if you look at the best corrected visual acuity, based on the definition, as the best corrected visual acuity is 20/80 in the better eye, which is less than 6/18, so would fall into the category of low vision. But if she doesn't have any problem with the present acuity, with the present vision which she has, if she can manage whatever work she has to do, there's no functional problem, we will not need to intervene anything. So she doesn't require to be referred to low vision clinic just because she fits into the, based on the definition, she fits into the category of low vision. You have to think about the functional limitation and then think about the referral. This is the last case here. So this retired teacher with a diabetic retinopathy, and if you look at the best corrected acuity in the right eye, better eye, does not qualify to be called as person with low vision. But if you look at near acuity, best corrected N8 at 25 centimeter, she may have functional problem with the reading and may require intervention. So whether in the form of higher rad, illumination, or whatever needs to be done, or low powered magnifiers, but may need intervention, she may have functional issues. So you have to keep in mind that just focusing on the distance visual acuity based on the definition or the visual field may not be suffice. At times you have to look at the functional limitation, at times you have to consider for the near acuity. So if we look at how do we identify person with low vision, we have to look at all these factors. You have to look at best corrected distance near acuities. We have to look at the visual field. We have to think about visual acuity demand for their task. What do they do? Whether the present acuity would be suffice. And self-reported activity limitations if there are any. So there may be people with a mild impairment with 20/40, 20/50 who may not fit into the category of vision loss based on the definitions, but may have functional problem because their acuity demand for the task may be very high. If somebody's goldsmith has to look at the design and all those things, if it does not suffice, they should be referred for further intervention. And some diagnosis can also help you understand that, okay, in this particular condition, say optic atrophy, a significant amount of contrast sensitivity may be reduced, and even if you're seeing that high contrast acuity is good and person is complaining of difficulty, it's probably good to refer them for the assessment. This is how American Optometry Association defines vision rehabilitation. So it's a process of treatment and education that helps individuals who are visually disabled attain maximum function. So here the focus is what do you attain, what do you gain? So you gain maximum function, a sense of well-being, a personally satisfying level of independence, and optimum quality of life. So that is the focus of, that is the purpose of vision rehabilitation. So whatever strategies, whatever interventions you plan, all those methods or those processes are going to end up with improved functioning of the person, a sense of well-being, improved quality of life. And all this together, if you look at what will improve the quality of life, the World Health Organization, this framework, which we call as International Classification of Functioning Disability in Health, this ICF, helps you understand that what is happening here, what is the cause of disability, and how do we overcome, what rehabilitation should focus on. So the ultimate goal of vision rehabilitation is improving the participation. This is the key factor. Participation is defined as involvement in life situations. So if you look at the negative impact of health conditions, so here in the diagram, there are two components. One is the functioning, second is the contextual factor. So look at the first, functioning, the first component. So the health condition can negatively impact at different levels. It can impact at the organ level. So when you look at the organ level, so it's specifically say in terms of eye, what functioning would be affected? So it could affect the visual acuity, it could affect contrast sensitivity, visual field, color vision. So whatever visual functions you measure, you are measuring at the organ level. The other level is at the individual level. You can come out of the organ and see that, okay, if the acuity is dropped, if the visual field is decreased, if the person has impaired contrast sensitivity, how is it going to affect the individual? So person may have difficulty recognizing faces, may have difficulty locating ball while playing, may have difficulty to see in the classroom, on the board, in his books. He cannot read, or some of if anybody is attending my lecture and has difficulty accessing reading things on the slide, so that may be the activity limitation, because of which if person is not able to fulfill their family roles or whatever he is supposed to perform in the society, that is called participation restriction. And goal of rehabilitation is improving the participation. So we see if participation restrictions are there, we need to intervene. If there's no restriction in participation, person is getting involved in life like any other normally cited peers, we don't need to intervene. So that is what your history taking, your functional history should focus on understanding how the functioning of this person, how the person's participation in different areas have got affected. And in this WHO's classification, which we call as ICF, International Classification of Functioning, there are 9 different domains, 9 broad areas under participation, which include self-care, learning and applying knowledge, mobility, communication, interpersonal interaction, social life, major life areas. So there are 9 broad areas which people need to, so you have to have a checklist, you have to have visual function questionnaire, a structured form which can help you assess all those areas. And further, what you need to know that, because despite understanding the health condition, despite understanding the participation restriction, you may notice that there are people with the similar clinical features, same Stargardt's disease, same level of acuities, but their participation may be different. One person may be continuing education, one may have discontinued education. So there are other factors other than vision which may be influencing. So factors which are other than clinical features are listed as the contextual factors. Some of the factors may be related to the person, and so these are also, it may be the person's motivation to perform the task, their own preferences, their level of enjoyment with the task. So these are all called personal factors, and there may be factors which are external. So say in the classroom, how the lighting is, how much is the support that person gets with the teachers, with the peers. If you're talking about student, and if it is an adult, it may be the employer, it may be the family members, their attitude, their support, the government policies. So those are all external factors which we call as environmental factors. So in your history taking, not only focusing on the participation restriction, you're also focusing to gather information on whether the environmental barriers are existing, what are the barriers, what is stopping him to function, or how much is the person motivated to perform that task, or is it just the lack of motivation and he's blaming to the vision. At times it may be kids wherein you find that kids come, they have perfectly normal vision and they say that they cannot see on the board, they cannot do this A, B, C or whatever, and you may have initially checked that okay, visual acuity also there's a lot of fluctuation which is coming, and later on you may label them as malingering or whatever it is. So it may be lack of motivation or attention seeking. So are there other issues because of which person is not able to participate? Because there are multiple reasons, because your ultimate goal is improving participation. So it's important to understand how much is the role of vision loss and how much is the role of these contextual factors. And what we have observed, it's only 30% of the variance you can explain by the vision loss. 70% lies with the contextual factors. In the clinical examination, apart from determining the visual objectives and other things, so these are different components. We will not deal much with the calculation of magnification and trial of low vision devices. We'll be focusing on the first 4 things. The first step is review the medical record of the person. Before you go and call the patient, observe the patient, you look at the record of what is existing. So diagnosis itself will give you a lot of information. In the review of record, you can get to know patient's age, gender, occupation. Certain information may have been written, duration of vision loss may be there, level of acuity, level of visual field, color vision. So whatever your other people who have referred you, if they have recorded, that information can give you the starting point, that where do I start the examination, how much is refractive that person has been prescribed, how much is he using, and so is it a recent onset, late onset. So those things can give you some starting point. When you go to call the patient in the lounge, you may find that whether person is alone there in the waiting lounge or has come with one person, complete family members, or a teacher or neighbors. So who is escorting? What kind of support system that person has? What kind of dependency that person has? And a lot of external features also, say microphthalmos, nystagmus. Those things you can observe, or a large amount of squint. You can observe with just with your observation, you can pick those things. You don't need to do any other clinical examination. Similarly, if person is using tinted glasses or dark glasses in the waiting lounge, indoors, so that indicates that person has significant glare issues. So there's a lot of things which you can observe and make a note in your record that, okay, these are the things which you're observing. And the third thing comes determining the visual objectives. So in the visual objectives, you have to be very specific what literary requirements that person has. So that means that it's not just suffice to say that person has problem with the reading. What exactly person wants to read? Do they want to read newspaper? Do they want to read dictionary print? Do they want to read devotional book or anything else? Because for each print size, for each document, the print size would be different, the contrast would be different. Need for distance vision. So what is the color of board? What is the material with the teacher writes? How much is the distance where the person sits? Those are the details which you have to get, the kind of lighting which is there in the classroom, because that would guide you that, okay, what adaptation, what modifications probably can help the person do that particular task. So each task, when you're looking at for distance or for near, for independent travel, where exactly is the difficulty? Is it crossing the street? Is it within the house itself? Person keeps bumping into places. Is it descending the staircase? So what kind of lighting is there where the person has to often go for travel and all those things. So, and each person may have different lighting requirement, glare and other issues. So those are the things which we should be looking at to set our objectives, that, okay, these are the rehabilitation goals that we want to, these are the rehabilitation goals that we have to work with. And next comes is the clinical examination. So in the clinical examination, once you have set the rehabilitation goals, now you want to know, okay, these are the things which person wants to do. Now what does this person has in terms of distance acuity, near acuity? You may have got certain things which is recorded by your colleague in the patient's medical record. If you rely completely on that, if you think that they have done a good job, fine. If you think there are certain things which are missing or you want to do it in a better way, you can probably do it. So we look into that, how visual acuity recording can be different, what should be done and what should not be done. So you should use appropriate test chart. Appropriate test chart means you should know that, okay, for this particular age group, for this person's recording visual acuity, rather than recording counting fingers or different method of saying that fixing following, can we quantify using Lea symbols or some symbol charts for matching acuity? Is it possible? Or can we use a grating acuity for recording? Or in this specific case, person can probably identify, match or write and give me some response. And if the standard test distance is not suffice to record, if 6 meter or 4 meter is not working or 3 meter is not working, can we bring the chart at 1 meter and record it? So you will find that you can avoid recording counting fingers, because that's not a scientific method, it's not reproducible, and based on the counting fingers acuity, you will not be able to calculate magnification. So you need some numbers which can help you calculate magnification, some method which is scientific, which is reproducible and gives you accurate measurement of visual acuity. An important thing which is also important, this is important information for certifying. If somebody wants a medical certificate of visual handicap to say whether person has got 70% visual handicap or 40% or 100%, will depend on what acuity you have recorded in each eye and how precise you have recorded. Encourage the person to use eccentric viewing. Some people, if you ask them to focus straight, they may not be able to focus and give you the correct response. So these are the basic things. If you apply, in most of the cases, you will be able to quantify, get the acuity. And if you see even at 1 meter, person cannot read the top line, bring it at half meter and then do it. In the near visual acuity, the difference that we make is you record with or without glasses in the documentation. You record the smallest print that person can read, the test distance. Herein, the most important factor is the test distance. And this should be guided by the addition given or the amplitude of accommodation provided. As your distance acuity when you record 6 by 6 or 20 by 20, so the numerator determines the working distance. Often people here would just mention N36 or N24 and leave with that. N24 at 24 centimeter and N24 at 30 centimeter will not be same, as your 6 by 6 and 3 by 6 both are not same. 3 by 6 is equal to 6 by 12. Similarly herein, if you change the working distance, your acuity will also change. So it's important to document the test distance, and like for distance acuity, when you are saying best corrected, you are correcting for the refractive error. Herein, if you are near visual acuity recording for 15 centimeter or 25 centimeter, you have to ensure that person has adequate accommodation to focus at that particular distance of 15 centimeter or 25 centimeter. If person does not have accommodation, say person is aphakic or pseudophakic, you have given adequate addition. That is important. Otherwise, your near acuity, whatever you will record, will not help you to get the correct magnification requirement. And if you want to, it's important again to look at for most of the purpose. So listen carefully. What I'm going to say is going to help you to decide about the near magnification. If you have recorded near vision at 25 centimeter, if you're recording near visual acuity at 25 centimeter, your near vision, whatever you are recording, and if you have corrected for that distance, whatever near vision you have recorded, that itself will guide you how much diopter magnifier would help this person read small print of say N8 font size. If for most of the purposes that would serve the correct magnification. So if you don't want to learn magnification calculation, just record at 25 centimeters. So if person is reading N16 at 25 centimeters, for example, 16 diopter would be suffice for that person to read N8 print. If you give 16 diopter, person will be able to do that. So it's as simple as that. And test chart, reading material, whatever you have used, the language that you have used, if you document it so that in the follow-up visit person can see if there is a change in the acuity or no. This is another important area of assessment which is usually overlooked. People often think that the pathology in the retina or optic nerve is the cause, so why spend time, why waste time in refracting? But as we have seen and have mentioned, and in the literature also it is published that about 15 to 25% of the patients that report to low vision clinic may improve, and their categories may change. So people whom you would have thought moderate or severe visual impairment may improve to mild impairment or may improve to normal level category just with the refractive correction. There are some basic changes which you have to think of, that how should we do it, how should we correct it. So for objective refraction, if you're not able to see globe because of the high refractive error or something, you can think of doing radical retinoscopy, which is same procedure. You are doing it at a shorter distance, not at 66 centimeter. You do it at 20 centimeter or 15 centimeter and keep accordingly the working correction, and then you can get the value. So radical retinoscopy can be done. If person is already using some correction, you can consider doing over refraction. The other important concept in the subjective refraction is a bracketing technique, and to determine the bracket size here, those two lenses that person can probably differentiate the change of those lenses is using a concept of just a noticeable difference. And the other important thing is that don't use a standard test distance when you're doing subjective refraction for people having severe visual impairment. Say somebody is having 3 by 60, 2 by 60 or 20 by 600 kind of acuity. So those acuities with your Snellen chart or whatever chart you have in your clinic, you would have not recorded at 6 meter or 4 meter. So if you keep it at 4 meter, 3 meter standard test distance, probably patient cannot identify the change and improvement also. So here and again, subjective refraction can be done at 1 meter or half meter, where you started testing the patient's acuity. So start from the same place, same distance. If first you see the improvement. Yes, if person improves to nearly normal or to a level that you can record the or verify further at regular distance, you can bring it back, you can increase the distance later, but begin it at a non-standard test distance for patient with severe visual impairment. It may be helpful. Let's look at the just noticeable concept. This, how do you apply it? So how do we calculate it? So to calculate the concept of just noticeable difference, you look at the denominator of the visual acuity. So if you have recorded it in meter form, if you are using 6/60 form, then the denominator of the presenting visual acuity by 30 gives you the what will be the minimum dioptric difference that person can appreciate. If you are recording visual acuity in feet, say 20/200, 20/400, the denominator of the presenting visual acuity by 100 gives you the noticeable difference for the person's acuity. So here are two examples. So say if you have recorded 6/60, so the noticeable difference will be 2 diopter. So here this means when you are doing subjective refraction, in this case, whatever your refraction value is, so if you've got +10 or +7 or -7, whatever, after keeping that, if person's acuity is 6/60 or 20/200, now the changes which you have to make should be larger than 2 diopter, not smaller than 2 diopter. So if you change by half a diopter, patient will not appreciate, will say both the lenses are same. So say person's refractive error was +7, if you are showing whether 7 is better or 8, because the difference which you are showing is 1 diopter, person will not appreciate. But if you show a difference between 8 and 6, then person will be able to appreciate and say one is better over the other, because your difference is 2 diopters. Now 6 and 8, if you are using a larger bracket size, then person can appreciate and can respond to. And if you look at the lower level of acuity, say 20/1200 or 6/360, here the dioptric difference is 12 diopter. So here, and if you make changes of 1 diopter, patient will not appreciate. If you will use a bracket size of ±6, 2 lenses, and ask which is better, person probably can respond to. So keep that in mind, that yes, person with a severe visual impairment, lower level of acuity, larger dioptric changes are important to make, so that person can appreciate and can guide you to take to reach to the spherical endpoint. Look at this example. A person with myopic chorioretinal degeneration, visual acuity is recorded CF, 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 CF. So how do you examine this patient? So first approach would be record the acuity correctly at shorter distance. If you record it half meter, take the chart and see if you can quantify it. If you can quantify it, that value can give you the just noticeable difference, and you can proceed for the subjective refraction, even if you don't have a starting point with the refraction. The other option is you can think of doing a radical retinoscopy, go at 15-20 centimeter and see if you can visualize some reflex where somebody has written no glow. The third option is you can look at the axial length. If that can guide you that, okay, how much is the amount of myopia this person has. So we applied all these things and we got close to 45 diopter of myopia, and we saw that yes, this person is improving to 20/200. Knowing that, okay, optically with the glasses, it's not possible to make it in India. In our labs, we can't get this kind of lens. So we asked the person who had referred to us that, okay, do you want to intervene? So the ophthalmologist decided that, okay, we will give option of surgical option, and then that is the procedure they perform, and you see the outcome. So here, and at times identifying that, okay, this is the problem, and probably it's beyond your scope to correct it fully. So you seek help from other department. You may ask contact lens people to look at. You can ask people who can operate and see that, okay, that can help the person improve it further. Take the second case. In this case, if you're not seeing dull glow or no glow is there, again radical retinoscopy can be tried. You can also look at topography. That can help you start your subjective refraction and see how much this person can improve from 20/600. And for spherical endpoint, you can apply the concept of J&D, just noticeable difference, and bracketing technique to improve it further. The other important component which often people don't do in the clinic of contrast sensitivity, but even if you're not measuring it, you can get to know based on the patient's symptoms, patient's problems. So if people are saying that, yes, I have difficulty reading at the dimly lit areas or in the evening time, or they have difficulty in descending staircase, especially in the dimly lit areas, then those may be indicator that, okay, person is having, or recognizing faces is a difficult thing, because these are the areas where people with the poor contrast sensitivity would be having problem with. And what usually helps them is increased illumination, little higher rad than what you have predicted in your calculation can help these people. So if you're thinking of a magnifier, think of an illuminated magnifier if somebody is having impaired contrast sensitivity. In the clinic, often if you have peri-option chart, you can record it. If you don't have, if you're using a Complog or any other electronic system, you may have a low contrast visual acuity options, low contrast acuity available, or you may also get a Bailey-Lowy chart. So they have developed this charts which are usually available in different contrast levels, and people often compare the 10% contrast with the high contrast visual acuity, and if there is a difference of more than 2 lines, it is considered significantly impaired contrast sensitivity, and person can easily be trained and told that what adaptations have to be made to help them with. For recording that how the glare affects the person's acuity, you can use BAT, brightness acuity tester. But if you don't have that, no problem. Practically, you can observe how person is squeezing their lids, bending their head when they're going outdoors. So if they have come to your clinic during the daytime, you can take them outdoors, observe that if they're using their hand as a wizard, if they're having difficulty in mobility and other things, you can also carry with you some filters, some tinted glasses and cap, and give them to try those and see what works best. And that would be the solution for helping them. Now, once we have looked at, okay, that this is how we examine, these are the cases which can probably come. Let's look at how does low vision affect people. It's not only the person gets affected. At times, the family also gets affected. There's additional cost of care to them. There's lost productivity if they don't get employment because of it. So there may be lost productivity. So it's a larger picture. If you look at, yes, there's a cost, and that is why it's important to intervene. And for ease of understanding, what people usually do is that, okay, now it's a vast subject. How do I understand it easily? So can you simplify it? So people often classify vision loss based on the different conditions. So it's just for ease of understanding that these are different categories people have created, that it can be overall blurred vision. So all the anterior segment pathologies, which is corneal dystrophies, corneal degeneration, corneal opacity, aniridia, that can lead to overall blurred vision, amblyopia. Any posterior segment pathologies will come usually with some kind of field loss depending on which portion, which part of your retina or optic nerve has got damaged. So people may have central field loss, multiple field loss, or peripheral field loss in some specific cases. So we can look at quickly that, okay, what leads to it. So we looked at that, okay, these are the conditions which leads to overall blurred vision. So what happens? What do people face? Because the peripheral field is intact, people with a mild impairment in overall blurred vision may not complain of mobility related issues, but they may have difficulty in discriminating contrast. They may have image distortion. They may have glare issues. So people with the aniridia, people with the status post keratoplasty, and all those people would face something similar situation and may require, for glare control, you may need to give photochromatic lenses or tinted contact lenses, or you may think of, for an aniridia patient, you can think of prosthetic contact lenses. And refraction contact lenses is very important, and all optometrists can probably do this. And assistive devices, most commonly telescope for the distance. If they have good near acuity, good amplitude of accommodation, they can probably manage. So some kids, if they complain that board work is a problem, you can think of a telescope monocular handheld, or you can think of relative distance magnification. You can suggest them to sit close to the TV or close to the board, so if they can sit at, say, 2 meters distance or in the first row, and if that is suffice for them, that should be fine. If teachers can be requested to write little larger font size, that should be fine. So you can give a recommendation letter and see if those things itself can help the person manage things. If that is not suffice, then you may think of telescope. Glare control devices we discussed can be peak cap or tinted lenses. And to increase the contrast, if you see here in this picture, these two pictures, what has been done is the background of these handles have been painted in a darker color. Similarly, the staircase, if you look at the margins, have been painted in different color to improve the contrast. On the other side, if you see, it's not painted, so it's having poor contrast. For us, it may not make difference, but for people having impaired contrast, it will make a lot of difference. A lot of ease will be there when they have to identify the first and last step. So we know most of the macular conditions would lead to central field loss. People may have relative or absolute scotoma. They may have difficulty in perceiving things in the straight ahead when they look at in the center. So recognizing person's facial expression. So communication may be affected because they can't see the facial expression. They may have impaired contrast sensitivity. Glare issues may be there, and poor color discrimination, because if the cone cells are affected, people may have color discrimination related issues as well. They probably can still drive, can walk around, may not be an issue, but may have difficulty in reading the street sign. And when it comes to reading, the shorter distances would be preferred for them. So younger kids with the heredomacular degeneration or other cone dystrophies probably can manage at shorter distances because they have ample of accommodation. But when they are, say, around 30, 35, they may have difficulty because there and the presbyopia sets in early, their shorter working distance will not be sufficed because their accommodation is receding and near point of accommodation is receding, and they cannot focus at shorter distance. And if they move the print close away, the scotoma interferes with their reading. So herein, for near magnification, you can think of a spectacle magnifier with basin prism or a stand magnifier for long reading. Eccentric viewing technique, if it is a recent onset, yes, eccentric viewing training can help. But people who have any condition which is existing for more than 6 months or so, naturally they learn using eccentric viewing. Their preferred retinal locus develops and they can manage. If they have significant glare issues, specifically in patients who have rod monochromatism or cone dystrophy, usually they prefer red-orange filters or filters which are umber in color, brown in color, and other non-optical devices that can help them cut the glare issues would be useful. So it's important that once you have decided what magnifier, train them in using that. It's like you may guide people about progressive lenses. You may give them instructions how to use a bifocal or trifocal. Here in assistive devices, focusing, handling, what lens to eye distance should be, lens to print distance should be, how should they maintain posture, because prolonged reading may be challenging using magnifier without training. And unless you give training, it will not help the patient. And they may need to be given training, apart from training, educational and vocational guidance at what kind of professions they can choose from if they are thinking about career and all those things, at what stage they are reporting to you, whether they are in high school, they are in the transition phase from they are planning for their career and other things, or in their mid of their career they are reporting to you. Would depend on that what kind of counseling and things you are suggesting them. These are the conditions which leads to advanced peripheral field loss, and people would have a lot of difficulty with mobility because of the restricted field, and especially they would have problem in lower light levels, and they would have difficulty with the dark adaptation, and magnification usually would not help. So you would think of how illumination can help. And in terms of field expander, usually people talk about yes, reverse Galilean telescope and other things. We have tried, it doesn't work. It may be useful for a window period when people have very good acuity, nearly normal visual acuity, because the moment you're using magnifiers, it will drop the acuity by half if you're using the 0.5 times Galilean telescope. So field expanders, we have not seen any success with that. For glare comfort devices, you can see this girl with congenital glaucoma, the way she had issue, and you see this smile, it says all that how the filters help. The other contrast enhancing measures which you have seen in the previous picture itself, the edges of staircase and all those things, how it can be painted, but it is time tested and known that gold standard is training in orientation mobility using cane. So mobility cane is the thing which is usually successful with these patients. Let's look at some of the cases and we'll see that how much we have learned if we can solve this together, so people can unmute and tell me that what will you do with this specific case. If you are able to solve, then we'll understand that okay, then the purpose of this class is achieved. So this is a 36-year-old gentleman having diabetic retinopathy. And if you see best corrected acuity is 6/24 for distance. Near acuity is recorded with his glasses, N18 at 30 centimeter, and he has been prescribed minus 0.75 at 90 in the eyes. And his major complaint is reading textbooks, journals, newspaper, and glare in bright sunlight. Anyone? Are people there? Kapil?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, if anybody have want to talk about this answer, so please you can unmute yourself and go with the answer. So it is better if we calculate the near power and near magnification, like handle magnified or stand magnified, and calculate the patience.
If you think of, if you look at the patient's lens status, so what people often do is people look at the patient's age. Don't focus on the patient's age. Look at the lens, because your recommendation comes from lens. Okay, so there may be younger people who may have accommodation related issues, and because of which their near acuity may be problem. Here and there are early cataract changes which is there. This is a diabetic patient, have undergone laser multiple times. Okay, so here and the first approach has to be to look at in the glasses how much ad. So you see there's no ad which has been prescribed in the glasses. So think of giving ad, because if you change the age from 36 to 56, what will happen with the same lens status, same everything? You would think of giving 2.5 ad and seeing that okay how the near acuity improves. But herein people quickly look at that whether magnifier is required or no. No, don't think about magnifier first. Think about addition first. Think about illumination first. And if that serves the purpose, your job is done. And that can be done by anybody, anywhere, in your optical outlet, or in your vision center, or in your secondary center, in your retina clinic, glaucoma clinic. You don't need to be in low vision clinic to do that. See what happened to this person with 4 edition. He's reading N5 at 25 centimeter. His problem is solved. For glare issues, we suggested him to use photochromatic lenses, and photochromatic progressive lenses or bifocals would be suffice. If he has to work at the intermediate task, progressive would be a better option than bifocals. Quickly, if somebody can take the second case, it's a young girl, 8-year-old, iridomacular degeneration, 648 is the distance acuity, which is in feet, it will be 20/160. And near vision is N5 at 10 centimeters. She has good amplitude of accommodation. She's myope, sonided, she can read well. So near, no problem. The only thing is parents are concerned about short working distance, and board work is a problem. Watching TV is an issue. Anybody wants to take this? How do you manage this? This is how we managed. We suggested a 4x monocular handheld telescope, and with that problem was solved. We provided her training in use of telescope, and that was dispensed. And for TV watching, holding telescope, because it restricts the field of view and all those things, it will be difficult for her to enjoy. So we suggested her to sit close to it and then watch it. And you have to dispel the myths related to shorter working distance. Often parents would have concern that okay, if she's reading at this close distance, if she's watching TV, it harm the person's eye or the potential. So that you have to dispel the myth. You have to tell them that no, it's not harmful. The person can manage. So this case, if you look at, has near acuity of N8 at 10 centimeter, working at a medical store, has optic atrophy, and has difficulties reading small print. So because the medicine label print will be very fine print, and that vision which is having unaided, despite being myope, despite having good amplitude accommodation, that is not being fulfilled. So yes, low powered pocket magnifier can help the person. So that's what we recommended him, and if you see that he's happy managing his job. So herein that the CA person, chartered accountant person, is having nearly normal acuity, but has difficulty reading small print because of the impaired contrast sensitivity. If you look at the low contrast acuities, significantly lower, and he has been given higher ad. So he's been using, no, this is the present glass prescription. So this is hypermetropic prescription that he has been given. He's using hypermetropic prescription. So here and again you can think of if the near ad can be considered. You can think of low powered magnifiers. You can think of illumination over a reading lamp. Usually we recommend white cold light LED or CFL, not the incandescent bulb, because that generates heat and people may injure themselves if they move very close to the light or keep the paper underneath. It may be difficult, so we recommend to them to use a CFL 11 watt. And for computer, they can use inbuilt magnification or special screen magnification software applications that can improve the contrast as well. This is the last case. So in this specific case, if you see that person is a farmer and his major concern is glare, and we all know that what has to be done. So these are the solutions you can try. Whatever filters you have, you can see that it may come with different shades, different tint grades, and whatever patient prefers subjectively that solves his problem, you can recommend that. So what we look at through these cases is that optometrists can easily integrate low vision rehabilitation because it's very easy. It's not that difficult, and every practice has the expertise. All of you know how to refract. All of you have basic equipment. What you need, a little space for other resources. If you want to keep telescope and other things, if you want to keep some near vision chart which starts from N80 print size rather than something which stops at N36. If you want to have logMAR chart, it's fine. Even if you don't have it, you can use your whatever test charts which you're having at shorter distance and non-standard distance, and you can still quantify. Your understanding about optics will help you provide this care. You all understand basic optics. You all understand that, okay, the lighting can improve the contrast, how the glare can be controlled. So 25 to 30% of the cases easily you can manage. And some patients would just require reassurance. This is what American Academy of Ophthalmology recommends at 3 level. The ophthalmologists or optometrists that are providing the, so at primary level, what you need to do is just recognize the problem and respond. Recognizing means understanding that yes, this person with visual impairment, these are the implications probably person can have, and responding means either you provide care or you refer them to appropriate places. That also is taken care of, and that takes care of 50% of the problem is solved. At the second level, if you can record acuity precisely, refract, give a higher ad, think about lighting, think about filters for glare, so that is a level further which you can help the person. And even if that doesn't help, then you can refer them to comprehensive low vision rehabilitation services, wherein an expert can assess them and suggest the services. And then if the other training are required, say orientation training and the use of special software, they can be provided those training. So in primary level, what can be done? So this is what we have learned so far. So emphasis on illumination, contrast, eccentric training, non-optical solutions, and counseling, and referral to higher centers if you think it's beyond your scope, beyond your thing. And I'll be happy to take if there are questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for a so wonderful presentation. So there are a few questions on the chat box. I'm going to help you by reading out. See first question. And one question from the Ajit sir. He's asking for, what is your recommendation for the calculation power of the near device, considering the fluency and speed of reading, and most of the calculation magnification agreeing to the equivalent view distance method, where we do not consider the fluency.
Okay, so for the near visual acuity, the calculation I didn't bring it here specifically because I thought many people would not like to calculate, but if you're somebody's keen, we use equivalent viewing power calculation, and we usually keep 3 lines under reserve. So if somebody wants to read N8 print, you target for N4. So you keep 3 lines under reserve for fluency. And the calculation, if you want to know the formula is equivalent viewing power is best corrected near visual acuity divided by target near visual acuity multiplied with 100 by working distance in centimeters. So if say somebody's, for example, if somebody is reading N32 at 25 centimeter and wants to read N8 print, so N32 is 32 is your best corrected acuity. Your target would be N4. You will not keep 8 as your target because N8 is somebody wants to read. I'll keep half of that as the target. So which will be usually 3 lines under reserve. So you'll keep N4 as the target multiplied with 100 by 25 centimeter, whatever is the working distance at which you recorded N32. And that will give you 32 diopter as your EVP. So that is why I said if you have recorded at 25 centimeter, for most of the purposes, your near vision will straight away give you required magnification or required dioptric value of your magnifier. Your dioptric power, so the magnifiers are usually labeled with the dioptric power or with the X. So some people will write the magnification, how many times it gives. So some people would say 8x magnifier, or some people will say no, it is 32 diopter lens. But in the times magnification, there are people using different formulas. So at times the 8x, if it is mentioned, it can be a 28 diopter lens or 32 diopter lens. So you have to check that what is there. So usually what we follow is just dioptric value so that it is simple and straightforward.
Okay. So I guess we have done most of the questions. So if anybody have the question, please unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, the useful application in the mobile phone for low vision passenger, is there any applications or any website that help to for the
In
low
mobile,
examiner is the low vision passenger?
in each mobile, Android or whatever you have in this setting, you have accessibility option. So in accessibility, you will see that for vision related, you will have for color inverse is there, for large font size is there. So you can change the font size, you can change the background, foreground color. For people who are having severe visual impairment, there are so many apps which are there. And you can also download different apps if it's apps for the blind or apps for the low vision. So there you will also find apps which are there for currency identification, for color identification. So multiple day-to-day activities they can perform. And these days, the smartphones are making things so easy for the people who are having low vision or blindness that at times they don't need to go for the conventional magnifiers or devices because information accessibility is much easier through these platforms.
Okay.
Or the
Yes, we have
another
a-
option
yes, sir.
another option can be, Kapil, what I would suggest is if most of your audience is keen to know, we can have a webinar just on this topic, all the apps which
Okay,
are
sir.
available.
Sure.
Okay, so that itself can be a 40 minutes or 45 minutes
Okay,
talk.
sir. We'll be having this. Okay, sir. So,
And we have a
okay.
technical expert, Ashwarya, who can do it. So I would let her know, and if you're keen, we can plan for it.
Okay, sure, sir. We'll be happy for this, sir. Sure. So I guess we have answered most of the question. So uh, if anybody have the question, please unmute yourself and come with the question. We are here for you answering the question. And if you like to talk with this sir and you want to share your some experience, the platform is open.
Or if you
Okay,
get
sir.
doubt,
There is one question. Yes, sir.
also you can always write to me. My email is there. So if you're seeing a patient and if you're stuck anywhere, you can always send a message to me. I can see and then reply to you.
Okay, sir. So how can we use the can stick? So there is a one question for the NPL
How can
patient.
how can we use the
Yes, sir. Can stick. Can stick, sir.
cane? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we have orientation mobility instructor who is trained, who has the qualification to provide the training. So they provide training to these kids And what I see is as young as maybe 7-year-old, 6, 7-year-old kids. Because see, very young kids, parents would not leave them. So parents would be working with them as a sighted guide. Okay, so they would be so there, and the human sighted guide would be helping them. The time when they are expected to be independent in mobility and all those things, when they start going to school, so within the school premise and all those things. Um, so that is where the parents would think of making them independent. In some cases, that also um, they would not leave them. The parents will go and drop them, and then they'll bring them back. But when parents start thinking that okay, now kids has to be independent, I have seen that okay, 6, 7-year-old kids have undergone independent mobility training. So there are special techniques and which can be trained to them, and they can start using it. The training is not difficult, use of it is not difficult. What is difficult is accepting that yes, a child will be using it. Child may not have problem will be with the parents, problem may be with the society accepting it. So acceptance in the low vision management is the most important thing, and the attitude is something which is the negative attitude of people. When people look at it, they don't accept it that okay, it's normal. They would go and get them and give them advice that did you explore treatment, because they are not able to accept it that yes, child for this child there's no treatment and person has to use a cane for independent mobility. So there are kids who are keen to undergo training. Parents at times would not be willing that okay, is this the stage we will take care of her, we will take care of him for some years, and then we'll probably bring her later for training.
Okay, so basically the like other contact lens field or other dispensing field, like it was always be some backward at the low vision practice in the optometry practice in context of most of the practice. So why this is happening? Like why people are not going with the low vision more compared to the other subspecialties?
There are multiple reasons can be there. It may be the personal interest of the trainees. The second may be that they didn't work with the so with whomsoever they have observed, it didn't motivate them, the practice of it. The other thing is there are myths which are associated with the low vision practice, that people think that it's not lucrative, it's not profit making. It's like many people would in ophthalmology choose to become a cataract surgeon or refractive surgeon, not the retina surgeon, because they feel that whatever you do, people would be unhappy, people would be complaining always. So, but yes, but gradually scenario is changing. So scenario is changing in low vision area as well. People are getting motivated, and there is a demand which is coming from the patients also. Now patients are searching in the Google and finding that okay, these are the solutions. So if you cannot treat me, can you refer me? Can you suggest me which magnifier should I use? So retina people are finding out where should they refer their patients to. So most of the people are now asking that okay, can you train me? Where can I get the devices? Where can I get the training? So gradually things are changing.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I guess we have answered many of the queries, and considering the time limit, here I announce the closure of the discussion. Before ending the today's session, I would like to express my sincere gratitude towards the presenter and all the attendees, and also I'd like to appreciate all the helping hands for the iTouch program. So if you have any good notes before ending the today's session for our platform or for all the Nepalese optometrists.
I would say thank you to all the audience. Thank you to you for arranging this, and we look forward to the follow-up sessions if people are interested. So we can have a session on technology, as that was the something which we if people are keen on. And I would say integration of low vision is easy, and anybody who claims that we are providing comprehensive care or total eye care, it is not just total. It doesn't make total when you are doing just the slit lamp, visual acuity, IOP, and fundus examination. Your total eye care means you are thinking about prevention of eye disease, you are thinking of treatment, you are thinking of correction plus rehabilitation. So people whom you cannot treat also, offering them low vision rehabilitation, if you're not offering, your care is not comprehensive, it's not complete. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir, and have a good day. It's so informative and as well as so motivative, and we would like to see you again and again on our platform. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good day.
Kapil. Thanks, Kapil.
Welcome, sir.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Take care.